The big question is this: how do we take a seemingly ordinary world and make it beyond extraordinary? In yoga, there is so much more than meets the eye, and it's not just the things we do on our yoga mats that make the biggest difference. That is the question, and this podcast will give you the answer. My name is Austin Bitsis, and welcome to Life as a Secret Yogi. Welcome to an amazing first episode of the Life as a Secret Yogi podcast. I'm your host, Austin Bitsis, and as always, I'm framing this podcast around utilizing the tools of yoga on, but mostly off our yoga mats to make a seemingly ordinary world extraordinary. The innovative individuals like yourself and the guests on this show are what we call secret yogis. This show will be like no other yoga podcast you have ever listened to before, as it focuses on embodying what it means to become a secret yogi, which is our innate superpower that lives within us all. As an ex-collegiate long-distance runner, surfer, entrepreneur, I know yoga teachers and hardcore yoga students are not the only ones who truly embody this inner superpower of harmony between mind and body. So we made it a point to invite guests from all different backgrounds to give an unique perspective on living to our purpose with mindfulness, intention, and kindness. So we will make sure to sprinkle in a touch of art, music, nature, and other practices that make life beautiful and diversify the perspective to the yoga community. Our community of life's innovators is called the Secret Yogi Society, and you can become a part of this society simply by listening on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts, just like you are right now. However, if you'd like to interact with a group of like-minded, high-striving secret yogis who want to create an extraordinary world, then join our Facebook community, the Secret Yogi Society, which a link will be in the show notes below. Also, make sure to rate, review, and subscribe to the show on iTunes because as a new show, we can kindly use all the feedback and positive reviews we can get. So, without further ado, our guest today is Maree Beshears. Maree is one of those amazing people that I spoke to early on in planning this podcast, and I loved how she also loved the concept of becoming a secret yogi. Something we spoke about was that a lot of times we get stuck in this concept of becoming this perfect yogi, whatever that stereotype manifests in your mind. However, it is not becoming this yogi. It is yet using the tools of the yogi to cultivate a beautiful life. I thought Maree put it perfectly by putting it like this early on in our conversation. In this conversation, we really dive into the core questions of how to catalyze personal growth and utilize this personal growth to find purpose in life. Finally, we dive into the questions of how to align our actions with purpose. Often we find a disconnect in our actions and our purpose or our goals. It may be our day job that we work or simply the lack of internal drive to do what we know is best for ourselves. You've probably had that moment when everything seems to flow effortlessly and you wish that metaphysical light switch on was always turned on. Although this feeling is often short-lived, and when it does happen, again, it's sometimes hard to pinpoint that exact cause. I can tell you one way to ensure this flow state, or as I like to call it, this lights on state, when the light switch finally turns on, is to really align our seemingly fragmented actions and thoughts with our purpose and goals. This is where none of your resources are wasted and everything just seems to flow. When life flows seamlessly, that is when we take that seemingly ordinary world and make it beyond extraordinary. Maree has great strategies in this conversation, how to align our actions and purpose. So she'll share this in this episode. And before we jump into this episode, this is a quick section I like to call I Wish We Were Sponsored By. So today we have a sponsor, Vivo Barefoot, unofficial sponsor. I wish we were sponsored by, hence the section, because I'm absolutely a diehard fan and think that They're doing an amazing job in supporting the yoga and movement community by coming out with shoes with zero to heel to toe drop and wide toe boxes that make you feel like you're walking barefoot, which I know all you yogis, including myself, love. I have their white Geocourt men's tennis shoes, which is my kind of go-to everything shoe. And I also have their Black Primus Light men as more of my active shoe. They are really the only shoes that I wear and recommend to everybody. So check them out at vivobarefoot.com. And you don't have to, but of course, if you used affiliate link in the show notes below, it would be greatly appreciated. And all the proceeds go directly back into supporting the show. So without further ado, enjoy this episode with Maree Beshears. And don't forget to check out the episode preceding this when Maree Beshears takes us through a beautiful meditation. Maree Beshears is an amazing yoga teacher. She's an amazing mother and an all-around amazing human. She is the founder of Powered by Heart School of Yoga and resides in Fayetteville, Arkansas, where she also teaches at Trailside Yoga Studio. Maree runs powerful online programs that provide people with the tools to achieve their personal revolution over the course of 40 days. Maree also hosts a retreat as well as her own teacher training programs. She's extremely innovative, encouraging, and knowledgeable in all things yoga and mindfulness. It was actually someone near and dear to me that introduced me to Maree. We were able to connect during our first call, so Maree and I connected, and I am more than grateful to have you, Maree, on the show. And thank you, Devin Davis, for the introduction. So, to begin, Maree, can you take us back to how you discovered yoga and what was your first experience like?
Yeah, sure. That's so fun. So I discovered yoga really I discovered yoga much younger, and I wasn't quite ready for it at the time. So I was in my early 20s when I took my first yoga class and wasn't quite ready for it. So I was introduced to it, thankfully, again in my early 30s during a really challenging part of my life. So I was actually finishing my doctorate at the time, and I was working full time, and I was a mom to 3. And at the time, my mom had recently passed away, and I was going through a divorce. And a friend of mine said, "I think you should come take this class with me. I think it would be really good for you." And at the end of the class, we're in the fetal position and we're kind of rolled up, and it was a hot yoga class. It was really intense. I only did probably half of the class because I was going to pass out the other half of the class. So we're rolled into this little ball, and she's like, how do you feel? And I said, "I feel like a newborn baby." And so it was an on the mat class, and yet the teacher was really masterful at weaving in other aspects of yoga. So right from the get-go, I knew that yoga was more than an on the mat practice. She wove in teaching breath. She wove in teaching meditation. She brought in some philosophy. She was a really authentic teacher. It was that first, what I think of really as my first class, where I got to experience so many aspects of yoga. And I got to experience it during a time in my life that was really challenging. And I had this amazing experience of just like being in my body and being with my spirit for the first time in a really long time in my life.
And wow, and that's a pretty powerful first experience where you often hear a lot of people, it's like, yeah, I was going to yoga at the gym and I wouldn't stay for Shavasana. And that's kind of like the experience I had. And that's very powerful that you had that to kind of take you on that journey and knowing that it was that one thing. Did you know at the time it was like that one thing that was going to take you down the line?
I definitely knew because like I said, I had, like when I was younger, I went to a class actually at a gym in my early 20s. I studied a little bit of yoga and breath work during my pregnancy, especially my second pregnancy. It was really, though, that class, and it was just it was so serendipitous. It was like everything was happening, at the right time in the right place with the right people. And I definitely knew that I was going to be back. In fact, I went back to class the very next day, and I started going to classes with this particular teacher, who was she was a more athletic teacher, which is what I really needed at that time, because I needed to get the first class I went to was really more like a seated hatha yoga class. And I needed someone to really like kick my butt enough for me to slow down so that I could actually take a shavasana. And I also needed someone who could tell me why they were doing that to me. Like, I'm doing this to you so that your mind will slow down a little bit and will be forced to focus. And so she was just this incredible teacher who was doing this thing to us and yet with us and telling us why these things were happening at the same time. So I was hooked, and I started going to classes 5-6 days a week, on the mat classes 5-6 days a week, which again, she typically closed with like meditation. She introduced me to breath work. And so I feel really fortunate that I got this holistic picture, and yet also pretty similar, like really challenging yoga class that a lot of people are introduced to in the West, I think.
Yeah. And I think a lot of us are so wound up and need that physical exertion just to calm down. And that's something that I need in my practice now. And I know a lot of other people need. It's like I need to push myself so hard physically just so I could calm my mind.
Mm-hmm.
In some days, it's like I want that, even though I need something more calming, but I still feel that I need to push myself in order just to calm my thoughts and relax my body. So at least in the
Mm-hmm.
beginning of the class.
For
Um,
sure.
and
That
having
neck up.
yeah. And
We need to, my teacher, Suzanne Conrad, she talks about it as like living from the neck up. And until I took that class, I had been living from the neck up. And so to be able to just reconnect my head with my heart and my body was like, it sounds like for you, that was the medicine that I needed.
yeah. And it opened up a whole door for um, beyond the physical practice and
Mm-hmm.
wanting to know more, but I wasn't able to achieve that. And I don't think I would have wanted to achieve that unless I achieved what my body needed physically first. And having a good teacher sets the pathway for your journey and unveils the journey down the line. So that's really awesome that you had a great teacher. And then how has yoga helped you kind of find your purpose or your dharma? And what is your dharma? What is your vision, your purpose, would you say?
Yeah. So my dharma is a teacher. I'm a teacher. Um, I was born a teacher. I've discovered my path being a teacher in different ways. So I'm trained to be a teacher, like an actual public school teacher. I also have trained public school teachers. Now my job is in innovation and education, and I help teachers and leaders in public education figure out how to transform education so that students want to actually be in school, and be they just want to be there. And yoga, I'm a yoga teacher, and I'm also a teacher of yoga teachers. And so I would say that's my dharma. And I for a while, I wasn't really integrating the two. I was seeing like, this is what I do in yoga and this is what I do in education. And I would say an amazing shift I've had in the last probably 5 years is seeing myself as I'm a teacher. It doesn't really matter what I'm doing. That's what I am. And when I say teacher, I mean, I'm a guide on the side. So I'm not a consultant. I'm not here to like tell you what to do. I'm here to be with you, and you share and I share, and we learn together and we co-create.
And that's powerful in the sense that you're following your purpose, your vision, your dharma all day long. It's like when
Mm-hmm.
you're working as a teacher and you're teaching and you're spreading that message. So it must feel rewarding for yourself and how you kind of aligned your life in that direction.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of was leading on to my next question was, you completed your PhD, and I'm guessing it's something related to education.
That's right. Yeah, my PhD it's a PhD in education. It's a doctorate of education in curriculum and instruction. And what I studied, it's just so interesting because it's like when you're, I believe that God, the universe, like source, whatever you want to insert there, I say God. I believe that God is giving us multiple opportunities all the time to really find our dharma. And so for me, I mean, even my dissertation was on inquiry in education, and how important it is to really, for students to be the driver in their learning, in their education. And what does yoga say, right? Like yoga says that part of the 8 limb path is inquiry. It's self-inquiry, right? And even if we have like an incredible teacher, that really we're the ones that we do the work. And when we do the work, that's when the transformation happens. It doesn't happen when someone else does it to us, right? It happens when we do it. And so we do it for ourselves for a really intentional reason. And so for me in education, it's like that was my purpose all along. That's the kind of teacher I was. I got better. I definitely got better at being that kind of teacher. But even when I first started doing yoga, I didn't see the connections, I think. Yoga was so transformative for me to get like out of my head and into my heart and into my body, which is where Powered by Heart comes from. The name comes from that. That was so transformative for me to also to just to be, because even in my days of leading, teaching, and inquiry from this place of, okay, the student needs to be in charge of the learning, there still wasn't like a heart connection for me yet until I found yoga. And I think yoga is what helped me make the connection and the integration. So like who I am when I wake up in the morning is who I am all day. And when I first started doing yoga, that was not the case. Like I was Crystal, I go to work, I have this identity as a teacher, leader at work. And then I come home and I'm this different person. And then I go and take yoga classes and, oh, now I'm a yogi. Right. And it wasn't integrated. And so now I'd say the power in my life comes from being integrated. I'm Crystal. This is who I am all day long.
Oh, wow. Yeah. I mean, that's integration, finding that purpose of who you are and not switching things on and off is what a lot of people and a lot of us, including myself, are searching for. It's searching for that you wake up in the morning and I'm Austin Bitsis and you're Crystal Beshears, and this is who I am all day, and I'm following my dharma. So I guess when we first spoke last week, you told me you were working basically 7 days a week teaching. And in order to do this, I'm sure you're embodying, I guess, the embodiment of becoming a secret yogi, as I like to refer, and calling upon those inner yogi superpowers. How are you integrating yoga and the tools of yoga and meditation and mindfulness? You mentioned it a little bit, but how are you integrating it when, say, one side imbalances and pulls you in a direction?
Sure. That's such a great question, because my day job as a so my title in my day job is a learning designer and innovation leader. And even though I created that title for myself. I have an incredible the director of our office of the work that I do during the day is incredible, and the amount of autonomy and support that she's been a mentor to me for over 10 years. And there still is definitely like what you would think of anyone would experience in a professional job that's housed at a university that serves the state government bureaucracy, right? Like there's a lot of pull to be busy and to be exhausted and to need to be on. So I experience those things on the day to day, and sometimes I get sucked into them. And it's like the next day and I'm like, God, I'm so exhausted. What's going on? And I'm like, oh, I got sucked back into the world, right? Like So here I am now, I'm observing myself being sucked into the world. So what do I need to do? Okay, I know what to do. First of all, I'm aware of what's happening. And secondly, now, okay, I need to take a step back, right? Like you do in meditation. In meditation, you see a thought come up, you see yourself get sucked into that thought or that story, and then you realize, oh, I'm the witness, I'm the one seeing that. So if I'm the one seeing that, I can pull myself back out of that. So there's a lot of that happening, like moment by moment for me when I'm working. It's not like I'm just, oh, I have all this amazing energy to pull from because I practice yoga. I'd say it's awareness. And then on the day to day, just like with you, right? Like the more consistent your practice is, the more consistent your meditation is, the more you are able to do that. So when I'm not practicing consistently for whatever reason, traveling a lot for my job before COVID, of course, I was traveling a lot for my job. So like long travel days sometimes, but even then, like finding opportunities to sit in silence on an airplane or to find a little bit of quiet time when I'm eating to like actually eat and not be doing other things. So there's things throughout the day that I'm doing, but I would say essentially what it is like practicing awareness.
Yeah. Yeah, no, definitely. I think practicing awareness, and that we're always in this sympathetic state, and this like go, 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 and then pulling back into this parasympathetic state and just taking a breath. Even like you sit down for a
Mm-hmm.
meal with your family and just taking a deep breath and just
Right.
everyone just relaxing. And then it helps with so many things, biological, but also mental. And I like to do extensive research on my guests and of course yourself. And I came across one of your quotes. I love to dance, laugh, travel, be with friends and family. And I know another one of your quotes you mentioned was, you are either now here or nowhere. Thought this is beautifully connected, these two quotes. This is a long-winded question and response. In the Yoga Sutras, they teach us how to achieve samadhi. For those who don't know, it is a state of oneness and divine ecstasy in which the soul perceives the entire universe. It is equal states of consciousness and union of being, physically, spiritually, and mentally and emotionally. So there is, of course, like the restless mind. If you struggle to do yoga or meditate, that might be you. So if you have trouble consistency, there's the stupefied mind for those who dwell on the problems. And then there's the distracted mind in which you can only concentrate for portions of time. Then there is the one point in mind where we achieve samadhi. Can you explain being present in our minds as in your quotes and learning to focus our fragmented minds? So this is,
Mm-hmm.
like I said, a long-winded question to kind of, based on what you were just talking about and speaking about, and being more present and pulling back your mind and just taking a deep breath. So how can we all learn to focus? They don't really teach us
Mm-hmm.
how to focus in school, but I think that's really
Right.
something important. That's something they teach us in yoga. And I don't know if you've integrated that from your learnings of yoga into your teaching.
Right. Right. Okay. So the big idea is, what does it look like to be present, like in our day to day life, and what are some things that I do or that I might recommend? Like how is that played out for me basically in my day to day life? I think it's a combination. I think if you were to so if I was to tell a new student, they're coming in off the street, they're working with me. And if I was just to tell them, oh, you just need to pay attention, right? Um, okay. So they leave and they're like, what? Pay attention? What do you mean? So I think of in the beginning, that's where a formal meditation practice and an on the mat practice, and then having a friend or a mentor or someone like that is really, really important. Over time, those formal practices, for me anyway, and what I've seen with students I've worked with, is they start to weave into the day to day more and more. And so then that practice of, oh, if I sit and I practice meditation, even 5 minutes a day. So for me in the beginning, it was literally 5 minutes of meditation. and 5 minutes of sun salutations. That's how I
And
started
what
my
does that
day.
5 minutes of meditation look like? Like if
So
somebody
for me,
has
in
not done that
yeah,
before.
so in the beginning for me, I started off with a sort of a hybrid in the beginning. It was 5 minutes using insight timer and just using like just the basic little bell. So like every minute a bell would go off and I'd be like, oh my God, I'm thinking, here I am, I'm lost in thought again, right? And the little bell goes off. Or I'm sitting there thinking, I'm like, oh my God, I'm terrible at this meditation. I keep thinking. And so then the other app I was using at the time, and this was like 10 years ago, was Headspace. And he does such a great job of talking about, if you notice your mind is wandering, congratulations, you're practicing. It's okay. So like a lot of normalizing was really important for me in the beginning, for people to tell me, like, noticing you have a busy mind is the practice. The practice is not being some sort of perfect stiller of your mind. I mean, congratulations if you get there, if you're already there, that's great, whatever. But in the beginning, for me, it was incredibly important. And I think this is why people connect to my teaching, because I'm really straightforward with them. And I'm like, if you were thinking about your dog, and then that made you think about how you needed to get dog food, and then you were like, oh shit, there's 3 other things I need to get from the store. Oh my God, why am I such a bad why am I so bad at adulting? And then you're judging yourself, and then you're like, oh God, I'm a terrible meditator. I can't even stop thinking about all of these things. So I think in the beginning, for me, it was just recognizing how much was going on in my head and how I didn't have any space from that. And I actually thought that I was that. So I actually thought that I was my thoughts. So what I would tell someone in the very beginning is, when you sit down to meditate and you get this much space from your thoughts, there's your evidence that you're not your thoughts. Because if you were your thoughts, you wouldn't be able to observe your thoughts. And so you start practicing that, right? Like with the seated meditation, and you start practicing that on the mat, and noticing that you were in warrior 2, but you're still evaluating and judging warrior 1. Okay, well now you're in warrior 2 pose, so be in warrior 2 pose. Or if you're concentrating on your breath and you notice that you get caught up in the laundry list of things to do and judgments and being in the past or projecting into the future, you're not here, right? So that's where the quote is, you're either, which is from Baron Baptiste, you're either now here or you're nowhere. So if I'm not here, I'm either in the past or present, which don't exist. If I can observe that and notice that and practice that. And for me, it took an actual formal seated meditation practice every day. Now I would say it's more, I'm driving down the road and I notice that I'm not paying attention to driving, right? Or I'm sitting with my partner and I notice that I'm not really listening to what he's saying. I'm thinking about like making dinner or whatever. So I bring myself back and my attention is on that thing, that one thing, whatever that one thing is, right? That's where my attention is. It's my breath. It's my partner. It's you talking to me. It's my child. It's cooking. So, but yeah, I think that we miss an opportunity with people if we tell them that they should just be able to automatically start doing that. Because I think for me and for most of the people I work with, it's a journey, and it's still it's a constant journey, right? That's why some people believe we get like a lot of lives to work on this, because it's a constant journey.
Yeah. And it's a journey, and just realizing it's a journey. It's okay that it's not perfect, and it's not going to be perfect, and just accepting it for what it is. Yeah. What really kind of resonated me the other day for a fragmented mind, I was actually, another passion of mine is dogs. So I was watching, like, funny enough, I was watching a dog video on Instagram, like a dog training video. I grew up with dogs, but currently I do not have a family canine companion. Hopefully by the time this airs, maybe that will change. But so, kind of back to what we were talking about with the fragmented mind and getting pulled in so many different directions. This dog video was actually on recall. So for all that don't know, recall is like, oh, come here. If your dog's away, it's basically to get them to come towards you. And it was a Doberman Pinscher puppy called Klaus. It was like this little, probably 8-week-old, 10-week-old Doberman Pinscher puppy.
Mm.
And there was so many different distractions all around, like on purpose, the dog trainer had. And there was, it's funny enough, if you hear the dog barking right now upstairs, it's a family's
It's
dog.
right on point.
Yeah. And basically there was other dogs, there was other humans, there was squirrels, noises, and this dog's mind was getting pulled in so many different directions. And how the trainer phrased it in terms of recall was like, this dog's getting distracted by so many things that we can't even tell. Their heightened smell, their heightened sense of hearing. And basically the point of recall is just to pull their mind back to that thing they're focusing on, which is to come here. And what really even more resonated with me, I'm like, come here, Klaus, the dog's name, was like the dog's mantra to pull their mind back into the present, back into the point that they were trying to focus on, that one thing.
I love that.
And that really resonated with me. And the video in the show notes, I think it was all things puppies on, or I think pups on Instagram. And it really resonated with me, that connection between yoga and another passion of mine, and how it's beautiful how all living things with a mind have that same issue. And it's just organic. It's just life. So that was just something that really resonated with me. But on to the next thing, I guess, can you talk more about living a life full of deliberate action from the heart? And this might transition into Powered by Heart. So you run a yoga school called Powered by Heart. And what is that message behind Powered by Heart?
Yeah. So the chief message behind Powered by Heart is to live from the heart. So to really first of all, get to know yourself, find out what your dharma is, and then start to align your life with that dharma. And that is living from your heart. So whatever your purpose is, which your heart knows, you don't have to go out and create it. You don't, I don't think you need to spend a lot of money on finding out what it is. Find out what that thing is, and the essence of that thing too. So sometimes people get hung up like, what's the perfect job, right? Or what's the perfect house, or what's the perfect partner, or whatever. And it's like, no, what's the essence of that? So if I was to even break down in my example of being a teacher, what's the essence of that? Connecting with people, being with people, being a guide. Why is that? Because I believe in people's innate ability to find their own purpose and to live that. And I believe that what we're given an opportunity to do, and being given the opportunity to live a human life, we are given an opportunity to find and live our dharma. And if we're all doing that, it's like this beautiful quilt, and it starts to weave together, right? Where you're living your dharma and I'm living my dharma. And it's the key to joy and happiness. And it doesn't mean it's easy, right? Like there are challenges, especially in our society. We're pushing up against a lot of ideas about things our parents expect of us, and things that society expects of us is not necessarily are in line with our dharma. So when you're living a life of deliberate action, everything ties back to, or is woven into, is integrated into your life's work, your purpose in life. And so for me, that's learned saying yes to some things that seemed like scary or risky, saying no to some things that my ego would have really liked to check off on my list of accomplishments. It's meant, a year after I finished my dissertation, I quit my job. My youngest daughter and I, we sold basically, but really gave away like all of our belongings. And we went and lived in Europe for a year. That was part of that was part of my dharma, was to really get out of um, my comfort zone of life here in the States and experience something really, really different. I've spent time in other countries that challenged me to learn and to grow. And all of those things, though, were a part of me, I would say, in my mid 30s. It would have been about my mid 30s to really start to think about what my teacher calls my legacy, like our legacy. What do you want to leave behind? That's connected to your dharma. So my legacy, I want people to say Crystal lived a life of purpose, and it was evident in the day to day, not just in the big things, not in like accomplishments, right? But the day to day, like she was a teacher. She was a lover of life. She encouraged other people to find out their life's purpose and to love their life, and to also to do that in a way that supported a higher good for others and a better world. And so everything starts to be connected and to be really deliberate.
Yeah.
That was a long, drawn out
No,
response.
it makes total sense. And it's like when I'm thinking about jobs or business decisions, it's like, what do I want to be known for? Is this aligning with my purpose?
Yeah.
And sometimes you have to, one, do hard things, things that might make you uncomfortable. Things like the show. The show was, it's not something that comes naturally to me to go in front of a guest. I'm always the person in when I start a business to be behind the scenes,
Mm,
and to put
yeah.
myself out there was something that really made me uncomfortable, and it still makes me uncomfortable. And also doing hard things, doing the things that do make you uncomfortable, and I guess accepting that there is rungs along a ladder, right? So there's rungs along a ladder. It's like, okay, this is not exactly 100% where I want to be, but it's in the direction. It's one step further to where I want to be.
Mm-hmm. So I have to jump in and say, like, you telling me that your comfort zone is behind the scenes, I wouldn't have known that. And to me, that's evidence that you're doing work on your path, because to me, it just seemed like this is what Austin does, right? Like, this is his jam. Like, this is, this is part of the work that he's supposed to be doing, because there's a sort of, another teacher I really love, Gabrielle Bernstein, she says the universe has your back. She has a book, and it's like the universe has your back. And it's this idea that when you are lined up with your purpose, with your dharma, and that's lined up, when you're lined up with that, that's lined up with this higher purpose, right? That, like, there's grace and there's winds that are supporting you. So it's like when you step out and you do this thing that's uncomfortable, what do you get in return? Well, you get to interview someone like me, who's like, I'm now one of your biggest cheerleaders, right? I'm like, go Austin. That's what the universe does. When you step out on a limb, like, other people are there, ready for you.
Yeah, yeah. And well, I appreciate that so much. And then, is this part of the step that you? So, is this the steps you take your light year leadership students through? I know it's about growth and a catalyst to achieve your goals in life.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and we've been talking about like why having a clear vision is so important. So, what are some of those steps you take your students through? Like, what are
Mm-hmm.
some simple, actionable steps that, say, the audience listening now can take and apply to their
Yeah.
lives?
Yes. Yeah. So the work that I'm trained in, and actually I'm working on training right now to be a faculty member for Lightyear leadership work, with my teacher Suzanne and about 60 other brave souls from across the world, literally from across the world. So that's pretty cool. And the first course that you take in that work is called Personal Power and Wholeness. And it's really interesting to me, because when I first took it, it said, this is a course that will improve your self leadership and your communication. And I was like, oh, I'm a great communicator. I'm a teacher, right? Like, I don't know I really need this. However, I really trusted the teacher, and I had a friend who was doing the work, and I was like, you know what though, I'm gonna set that aside, and I'm just gonna jump in and do it. And I learned it was like, this isn't your average like oral communications that you take in college. This is like, first of all, is learning to figure out what you want in your life. What is your higher purpose? And then beginning exercises that I love is called The Power of Knowing What You Want. And it starts with a really simple geometry, which the mind loves and attaches to. You draw a circle. So people that are listening could do this right now. Draw a circle. Inside the circle is everything that you want in your life. Outside the circle are the things that you don't want in your life. That geometry of the circle is the boundary. What most of us focus on, including myself when I first started doing this work, was things that I don't want, right? So like I could come onto this interview and I could say, I don't want to do a shitty interview. I don't want to ramble. I don't want to sound stupid or to not make sense. And that's where my mind focused, those thoughts. That's where my mind focused before I started doing this work. Now I can say what's inside my circle. I want to be myself. I want to communicate what's important to me. I want to really be present with Austin and answer the questions. And I want to inspire people in some way. Like if one thing that I say today, or one thing that you say, one thing that we create together during this interview inspires someone, job well done. So when I enter a conversation with someone, when I start a new project at work, when I'm planning a retreat for Powered by Heart, when I'm bringing in other collaborators, the first thing that we do is the circle exercise, and we start to get really clear. It's like at the beginning of a yoga class when your teacher says, set your intention. We get really clear on what we want to create. And then we start to say, what does that look like? What does that sound like? What does that feel like? So then we get even more deliberate and descriptive.
That's powerful. I'm gonna actually try that myself. I know recently what I've really been getting into is mantras. So finding out what I'm most fearful and what are those hard things that I'm afraid of doing, and then coming up with positive mantras to reset myself, saying them 10 times each in the morning, saying them 10 times each at night, and then during the day when I need them most, during times that I feel that I am not, that fear is coming up in my life. It's just saying those and kind of resetting myself. And those mantras are like come Klaus for the little puppy. The Doberman Pinscher doing recall. So
yeah. So it's like you have this formal time that you practice it in the mornings and in the evenings, right? So that's like your formal meditation practice. There's that parallel. And then throughout the day, you've set up that anchor, right? In the morning and in the evening, you've set up that anchor. And so then you have that anchor point throughout the day. And for me, in the work that I've learned with Lightyear and with Suzanne, we call that a declaration. And so a declaration is like a personalized mantra. And I actually have one tattooed on my body because I wanted to remember it. And so here it says love, and then here it says brave. And so when I open up my arms, my mantra is, I'm a living example of brave love. And so brave love is, and that's connected to Powered by Heart, right? So like it's all connected. And brave love sometimes means like fostering a relationship with my soon to be bonus daughter. I'm engaged. And so part of brave love means fostering a relationship with her mom, even though that's really uncomfortable, right? That means figuring out how I might connect with someone at work who is quote unquote difficult. It's continuing to open my heart. It meant for me getting back out there and dating after a really difficult, painful divorce? What does it look like to be a living example of brave love? And to me, it means continuing to open my heart, even when like the safe and maybe easy thing in the short term would be to close myself off.
Yeah, and I think that's super relevant right now. So for all the listeners, we're during this quarantine time of the coronavirus. And I guess this kind of goes on to my question about how do you think that yoga is going to change? How do you think that we could continue this community,
Mm-hmm.
especially during this quarantine time and this more virtual time?
Yeah. So one of the shifts I'm working on in my language, which language is really powerful, and that's another thing that I teach in yoga and self leadership and personal development. So one of the shifts I'm making in my language is I'm using physical distancing instead of social distancing, because I'm actually not socially distancing right now. In fact, if anything, I have had more social connections in the past month than I had all year. I'm teaching my classes virtually. I have students who've moved. I'm actually now in Little Rock, Arkansas. Just last year, I moved here to live with my fiance, and I have people who I used to teach. I still teach at Trailside, but I go down once a week and I teach that class, or go up once a week, really would be more accurate. I teach that class. I have students, though, that I've met in Little Rock that are practicing with my virtual class. I have students who've moved off to California. I have a student who's moved off to Phoenix. I'm talking with you. You were in New York last week when we talked. Now you're in Pennsylvania. So here we are, and there's this web of connections that we all have. I have students and friends that I made when I lived overseas in Germany that I'm connecting with. So it's really interesting, because I think if anything, if we can harness the learning that we're gaining right now, and if we can leverage that and talk about that, things that we learned, we're learning, we already knew. However, we're having to get really real and honest about the amount of inequity in our country right now, right? Like that's being put right in front of our face. You can't deny it. So we've got this incredible opportunity to have those conversations. So we have all this right now that we can connect on, that we can have conversations, that we can be change agents for. And I think that yoga is the perfect place to do that, because all of those things exist within each of us, right? In that mind that you talked about, that's like our deepest concerns about like not having enough, or not being worthy, or not having love, or being loved. Like all of those things are in our face right now. And yoga, whether you're studying the chakras, you're studying like the root chakra, right? Or you're studying the heart chakra, or you're talking about meditation, or you're talking about what is the pose of a split Hanumasana? What does Hanuman have to teach us about taking leaps of faith? So it's like it's all here and it's ready for us. I think we just have to say, are we going to see this as this devastating time in American life? Are we going to see this as a time where we started to talk about real shit, like real things that are happening, and actually band together and do something about it? So that I have a hope that um, we're going to be a cleaner society. And by cleaner, I don't mean like washing our hands. I mean, like, there's a lot more depth in that. When I say that, we're going to be more connected, and we're going to change some things and be a more loving, compassionate society. That's really a lot for the question that you
No,
asked. I have
no,
high hopes, though.
that was I love how you said instead of social distancing, physical distancing, which is so true because I also feel that I've had so much more social connection in these last month or 6 weeks. And it's really been awesome how it's so accessible and how it's been here the whole time. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like video calls and any other type of kind of like face-to-face calls. It's been here the whole time. It's just no one's kind of taken that leap
Yeah.
to just make
Yeah.
that connection and just sit still and have that simplicity, have this
Mm-hmm.
simplicity. And like, a quote that I like is like, the act of consistency is the art of simplicity. And it is so
Mm.
simple. And then we have such consistent social interactions. And that's what really makes a change.
There's an opportunity right now. And like what I'm experiencing too is that some of those connections are more meaningful. So whereas, on a Friday night, my fiance and I 2 months ago, right now we might have been out at a restaurant having a meal, and like we would have been connecting and it would have been great and beautiful and right. Like I'm not saying it would have not been great. And instead, what we're doing tonight is we're cooking a meal at home, and I'm having this conversation with you because I'm not spending the time driving to the restaurant and waiting in line. And so I think we're learning how to use time a little bit differently now, and we're learning how to be more innovative and to have a bigger vision of what it means to connect with people. And so I think we have a lot to gain. And yet at the same time, like when I watch the news, I think that's part of, you asked the question earlier about samadhi. You talked about samadhi, and to me, on the path to bliss, we learn how to be sad and grateful in the same moment. It's really full. It's a really full place to be. So like I can be looking forward to the future, and at the same time, I can be incredibly sad when I watch the news and I hear about all of these people passing and all of the mourning and all of the loss. And that those two things are not, they don't have to be exclusive, right? Like it doesn't have to be black or white or good or bad or whatever, which is another beautiful lesson from yoga.
And there's always something in life to be grateful for.
Right.
So you have a 40 days to personal revolution program. Can you take the audience briefly through what that is? And is it going through some of the steps that we just talked about?
So I was really fortunate in my early career to study with a teacher who had trained with Baron Baptiste. And Baron Baptiste is an incredible teacher in the yoga world. And one of the programs that he offers that has been really transformative for me and a lot of other folks is this 40 days. So it's inspired by that work, and we call it a 40-day challenge. And so we use the book, The 40 Days to Personal Revolution from Baron Baptiste, and we use a lot of the same sequencing, and we work through that book together. This is the first time actually, and I had planned it before COVID, which is really serendipitous. This is the first time we're doing it digitally. And that was part of me pushing my comfort zone a little bit with becoming more masterful, improving my craftsmanship with using technology and Zoom and recording myself, both teaching and practicing, connecting with people. I'm using Google Classroom for all of the content. And then I'm using Zoom to connect, and I'm using the breakout rooms feature in Zooms for people to have that kind of more intimate small group conversation. And for me, that program, 40 Days to Personal Revolution from the Baptiste Institute, was really incredible. And it was something that I wanted to offer people. I started offering it locally. However, I started having people ask me like, hey, I've moved off. I live in Seattle now, or I live in California now, but I want to do this. And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to try one digital and see what happens. And so again, we follow a lot of what's in that book. But we also add in other things, and it's a little bit more organic in that we go with the flow. So each group that goes through it is going to look a little bit different based on what folks want to study. But also it's the idea that someone could buy the book and they could follow along in the book, and they could also connect with us and do the program. So it's got this incredible structure that's been tested and vetted and evidenced by a well-known institute for yoga. And then yet at the same time, it also has this like homegrown, innovative spin to it
Yeah.
from people I've worked with over the past 10 years.
No, that's awesome. I actually have that book, and I love that book. I love Baron Baptiste's his work. And listeners can find that on your website, poweredbyheart.com.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. They can find that. They can find a upcoming retreat that I'll be leading at the end of the year. If we're all traveling and such and hanging out face to face at that time.
Thank you so much for joining this episode. I hope you loved this conversation. If you're the type of person who has taken action to make life beautiful through the tools of yoga, I'd really appreciate if you headed over to iTunes and left us a raving review to keep this show going. Every review is read by myself, the host, and your feedback will most definitely be taken into account for future episodes. Also, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Have an extraordinary rest of your day, and remember, our actions and thoughts are contagious, so make them good ones.